Good evening. Tonight, we return to the quiet corners of forgotten places, where the truths are soft-spoken and the answers don't rush. Each of these stories will take us through the small crimes and large consequences of lives once overlooked. Whether fiction or pulled from history, they unfold gently, made to guide you softly into sleep. Let us begin. Story 1. The Orchard Keeper's Wife. In the spring of 1968, the apple trees in Rose Hill bloomed late. Locals said the winter had overstayed its welcome. Others blamed the soil. But those closest to the land said something else had shifted, something quiet, like a breath held too long beneath the frost. That same season, Meredith Cole vanished. She lived with her husband Walter on the edge of town, in a narrow house framed by apple trees and silence. Walter was known to everyone, not friendly, but reliable. A man who kept his head down and his fence tall. Meredith, by contrast, was soft-spoken and strange in gentle ways. She sang to plants. She painted the shed door lavender. She once told the grocer she could feel storms in her teeth. The morning she disappeared, no one noticed. The bakery opened. School bells rang. Walter's truck left the drive and returned like always. It wasn't until Tuesday that questions surfaced. She missed her book club. She missed her shift at the library. And her cat, always perched in the upstairs window, hadn't been seen since Sunday. Walter claimed she left after an argument. She needed space, he told the sheriff. She'll be back. But she never was. In 1992, during a renovation of the farmhouse's attic, the new owners found a cloth-wrapped journal tucked in a broken rafter. The paper inside had yellowed, but the writing held firm. It began as lists: garden seeds, jam recipes, memories of spring. Then slowly, the entries darkened. Meredith wrote of bruises hidden beneath sleeves, of silence that lasted days, of footsteps on the stairs that made her stomach turn. One entry simply read, "He doesn't know I'm writing this." The final pages changed tone. Dreams of running, plans made, a date circled, April 13th, the day before she vanished. The last entry was just 3 sentences. "He told me if I left again, I wouldn't make it far. I believe him now, but I'm going anyway." That same year, irrigation repairs unearthed bones beneath a gnarled apple tree near the orchard's edge. Not buried deep, just hidden, like a secret meant to be forgotten by time. Dental records confirmed the identity: Meredith Cole. Alongside the remains was a rusted necklace and a tiny scrap of folded paper, written in careful, shaking hand. "Next time I bloom, I will not be buried." Walter, then in his 80s, was brought in for questioning. He denied everything, claimed the journal was forged, said the orchard swallowed things sometimes, tools, stones, maybe people too. He died before the case reached court. No charges were ever filed. The town mourned in its own way. A plaque placed at the base of Meredith's tree, a library fund in her name. And in the fall, families still come to the orchard, unaware of the story among the roots. Locals say a new tree now grows taller than the rest, one that blooms early and sings in the wind. Children say it hums at dusk, like someone humming back. Story 2, the mailbox on Cedar Road. For years, a faded blue mailbox sat crooked on Cedar Road. No address, no name. But once a week, someone slipped a letter inside. It began in 1974. A postal worker named Frances reported it to her supervisor. But the postmaster simply replied, "Let them be. Some people write to ghosts." The box was bolted into concrete and painted decades ago. The flap rusted but still moved. Residents called it the listening box. They said if you pressed your ear against it, you could sometimes hear paper unfolding, or the click of a pen. Some thought it was a prank. Others thought it was sacred. In 1981, a retired fireman named Joel Stoddard walked into the sheriff's office and asked to speak to someone. Not a lawyer, not a priest, just someone who would listen. He claimed that in 1955, during a field fire, he and another firefighter discovered a boy, not burned, but shaken, hiding beneath an overturned water barrel. Joel admitted to chasing him back toward the road and pushing. He never checked if the boy got back up. The town dismissed it. Joel was known to embellish. His memory was failing. But a week after his confession, someone slipped a letter into the Cedar Road box. It read, "You didn't mean to, but you didn't stop it either." In 1993, construction crews preparing for a new housing development removed the oak tree near the old fire line. The roots were deep, twisted. Beneath them, they found a child's shoe, a rusted toy car, and eventually, shallow remains. DNA testing was limited at the time, but the boy's estimated age matched Joel's story. The project was halted. A small plaque was placed nearby, reading only, "Known at last." Over the next 3 weeks, 17 letters were found in the mailbox. None had return addresses. Some were one sentence. Others, pages long. They weren't addressed to the boy. They were addressed to the guilt. No one ever saw the letters being dropped off. The mailbox was eventually reinforced and maintained by the town. To this day, people leave notes, apologies, lost memories, fragments of confessions. Some even record their thoughts and transcribe them at the box. "He doesn't answer," one woman said, "but I feel like he hears." Psychologists from the State University once installed a motion sensor camera nearby. It captured nothing. The film was blank. But the mailbox was full the next morning. And if you stand nearby long enough at night, some swear they hear the flap move, or the soft sound of someone reading. Story 3. The Millstone Ledger. Millstone County's archives were stored in a stone basement beneath the old courthouse. Damp, forgotten. During a 1985 audit, a clerk named Caroline Finch discovered a ledger misfiled behind a row of supply boxes. It listed disbursements, quiet payouts to grieving families. The deaths all tied to Millstone Regional Hospital. Dates were handwritten. Sums were modest. Signatures were missing. Most disturbingly, the names matched obituaries with one unusual detail. Each patient had died at 3:14 a.m. Ellen Baird had worked in Ward 3 from 1968 to 1982. No complaints, no formal reprimands. She brought cookies for night staff. She spoke in a whisper. When questioned in 1986, Ellen didn't deny anything. She only said, "They didn't want to hurt anymore. I made sure they didn't." No charges were filed. The statute of limitations, the lack of physical evidence, the legal ambiguity of consent, it all blurred. In 2007, while preparing to demolish the old visitor wing, a maintenance crew found 12 cassette tapes hidden behind the plaster of a support wall. Each was labeled with a name and date. The tapes were mostly quiet, but faintly, under static, were soft voices. Not medical reports, but conversations. Desperate whispers, reassurances. Then a single phrase spoken calmly. "You can rest now." The hospital denied knowledge of a third ledger. Caroline, now retired, believes it was kept separately, by hand, off the books. She swears Ellen never worked alone. Today, a new hospital stands on the same land, but the break room still has a seat labeled EB. Staff claim the room is always cold. Some say it smells faintly of lavender. And on rare nights just past 3 a.m., the hallway lights dim and stay dim for exactly 1 minute. Story 4. The Stillwater Greenhouse. Stillwater was a mining town turned quiet suburb in the early 1960s. One of its earliest landmarks was the community greenhouse, a curved glass structure nestled between a library and a school. It was run by a botanist named Clara Dunn. Clara was admired for her unique orchids, hybrids that seemed to glow in low light. Her garden was always open to visitors. Locals swore her plants responded to her voice. In 1976, Clara disappeared. The doors were locked. The greenhouse, strangely, remained warm and lit for several days after. People said the orchids bloomed brighter that week than ever before. One child claimed he saw Clara inside on the night she vanished, not walking, but standing perfectly still among the pots, as though listening to the soil. 2 years later, while installing new piping, workers unearthed a chamber beneath the greenhouse, a root cellar long forgotten. Inside, wrapped in burlap and layered in moss, was Clara. Her hands were stained with soil, as if she had dug herself a resting place. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, only her glasses, folded neatly beside her. The police found her journal hidden behind a row of potted succulents. The final entry, "They whisper back now. I only listen." Botanists who examined the cellar reported unnatural humidity levels. One orchid nearby was flowering out of season, a bloom unknown in any database. In 1989, a French pen pal named Elise sent the town library a collection of letters Clara had written years earlier. They included sketches of new plant strains and lengthy reflections on silence. One passage stood out. "I don't sleep much. They move at night. I swear they lean toward me when I'm thinking too loud." A month later, a botany student reported that one of Clara's orchids, known only as Dunn Hybrid 3, reacted to human breath. It tilted subtly toward sound. The experiment was never replicated successfully. Some theorize Clara's isolation affected her mental state. Others believe her orchids were truly something new, perhaps too new. The Stillwater greenhouse was closed indefinitely in 1991 after several visitors claimed to hear Clara's voice on breezes passing through the vents. Others reported vivid dreams after visiting, dreams of sinking into soil or waking to find dirt beneath their fingernails. The building is now padlocked, but the plants remain. Orchid cuttings from Clara's collection continue to thrive in private homes. Some say the petals close at night, unless music plays nearby. Botanists have failed to name the origin of Dunn Hybrid 3, but those who've tended it say one thing: if you watch long enough, the orchid watches back. And sometimes, if the room is quiet and the lights are low, the leaves rustle, even when the air is still. Story 5. The Voice on Route 6. Route 6 runs straight through the Midwest. Long, flat stretches of farmland and faded truck stops. Drivers say it's where time drifts. In 1981, long-haul truckers began reporting a strange CB radio signal near mile marker 197. A voice, calm, neither male nor female, whispering, "You're not alone. Exit soon." At first, it was dismissed as interference, a pirate signal, but drivers began filing identical reports. The same phrase, at the same spot, always between 12 English and 12:15 a.m. Some changed routes altogether. Others left offerings, matchbooks, receipts, at the mile marker's gravel shoulder. That summer, 5 truckers went missing. All had last radioed dispatch from the same stretch of highway. Their rigs were found parked neatly. Engines off. Radios tuned to the same static-filled channel. One cassette tape played on loop. "You're not alone. Exit soon." Family members reported strange calls from the missing truckers' phones. Silence on the other end, sometimes lasting minutes. One wife claimed she heard soft breathing and what sounded like a train whistle, though there are no tracks near Route 6. In 1990, a maintenance crew discovered a long-abandoned rest stop obscured by overgrowth. It wasn't on any maps. Not even the oldest road records had mention of it. Inside the building, 7 chairs in a circle, facing a rusted intercom. A faded poster on the wall read, "Rest your soul. 1 more mile." When the intercom was powered, it crackled. Then it spoke. "Exit soon. We're waiting." Static still plays. Route 6 was repaved in 2005, and the area around mile marker 197 was fenced off. But CB radio users still report faint static. Some say they hear laughter. Others hear their names, softly spoken. On occasion, drivers report waking up miles from where they parked. Clocks unchanged, with unfamiliar dirt on their boots. The rest stop was supposedly demolished. But satellite images sometimes show its shadow. And now, if you pull over near mile marker 197, your radio might whisper, "Don't miss your exit. It's already behind you." Story 6. The Record Keeper of Fern Hollow. In the hills just north of Rose Hill, the town of Fern Hollow was home to fewer than 1,000 residents and exactly 1 archivist. His name was Vincent Hale, and his job was to collect the town's memories, newspaper clippings, birth notices, death records, everything. But over the decades, Vincent's records began to grow odd. Not false, just off. One obituary reported a woman's death 3 years before she died. A wedding was listed for a couple who had never met. A series of missing persons notices appeared in folders dated years before the people vanished. When confronted, Vincent simply smiled and said, "I just record what's left behind." The townspeople eventually stopped asking, and the oddities kept coming. A ledger titled Rain 1994-2001 appeared 3 years before a historic flood. A file labeled The Girl with the Yellow Hat included photographs that would later match a child not born until 2005. The records room beneath Fern Hollow's library was supposed to contain only official documents. But one evening, a volunteer named Margaret stumbled upon a locked door behind a curtain. Inside was a chamber filled with hand-bound books. No labels, no system. Each page contained full narratives, names, conversations, sometimes sketches. All dated, all written in Vincent's unmistakable cursive. And many described events that hadn't yet happened. Some were oddly personal, recording small secrets of townsfolk. An affair never revealed, a theft never confessed. Margaret found her own name in one entry, listed among volunteers who would find the room. Her hands trembled as she read, "She will open the door. She will decide to close it again." And she did. In 2003, a woman appeared in town looking for her grandfather, a man named Jasper Wren. She claimed he disappeared in 1972, and she had documents suggesting he'd been spotted recently. Vincent invited her to tea. That night, she vanished. Her bag was found in the records room days later, beside a new ledger. It was titled The Guest. It described her story, her search, her final walk, and her quiet decision to stay. But there was more. In its final entry, she wrote her own name, along with a line that read, Sometimes time keeps what it wants. Vincent passed away in 2007. He left no will, but one note pinned to his typewriter. There will always be one. Since then, the new archivist, chosen by unknown means, continues Vincent's work. Residents say the files are more accurate now, but sometimes too accurate. One boy claims his name was once in a folder, but it's gone now. He rewrote me, the child said, and I got to stay. But here's the twist. One curious tourist copied pages from the collection and uploaded them to a private website. They were predictions. Most came true. One entry read, "The archive will burn, but only the wrong pages." A fire broke out that fall. The back room was destroyed. But the ledgers in the locked room were untouched. And one new book appeared in the ashes, labeled only "The One Who Knew." No one knows who wrote it. Story 7, The House Where the Rain Never Stopped. On Dilmere Lane, in a cul-de-sac of aging homes, there stood a single house where it always seemed to rain. No matter the weather reports, the clouds gathered above it. Neighbors joked it was cursed. But the truth was harder to ignore after a series of disappearances began. Always people who had entered the home. Delivery men, handymen, a census worker. Their cars remained parked outside, but they were never seen again. Mail stacked up, grass overgrew, and yet the windows were always dry from the inside. Inside lived an old woman named Irene. She collected rainwater in ceramic bowls. "It keeps their voices," she said. Each bowl was labeled with a name and date. Some names matched missing persons. Others were unfamiliar, names no one in town could trace. Police were called after the 4th disappearance. They found nothing but the bowls, dozens of them. Irene would only say, "They asked to be remembered." Rain fell even during drought. Lightning flickered in the distance. And yet the home's electricity remained stable, untouched. A detective named Wallace spent weeks trying to unravel the case. He interviewed neighbors, tracked down relatives, studied weather maps. He began sleeping poorly, dreaming of running water, of dark puddles that whispered. His notebook included a strange drawing, the floor plan of the house, with rooms labeled not by function, but by emotion, remorse, repetition, return. On his last visit to the house, he vanished too. His umbrella was found folded beside the door. The bowl beside it was labeled Wallace, October 14. The home is now owned by the city but left untouched. Clouds still gather. Visitors report the faint sound of water trickling even in drought. Locals say if you stand long enough at the property line, you'll hear your own name in the patter, soft, like rain on glass. In 2020, a storm chaser installed a microphone near the roof. The recording captured more than rainfall. It held voices. A child saying, "I'm here." An older woman humming. A whisper repeating, "Stay with us." And the twist? A weather scientist reviewing the data recognized one voice, his own daughter, who had gone missing 5 years earlier, in another state. He returned to the house. He left a bowl of his own. The next day, a new bowl appeared beside it. It was labeled, "Together Now." Story 8, The Clockmaker's Mistake. In the heart of Morningsby, nestled between a cobbler's shop and an antiques dealer, stood Delling's Timepieces, a quiet clockmaker's shop known for its peculiar charm. Walter Delling, the shop's owner, was a man of precision. Every clock in his shop ticked in harmony, every gear aligned perfectly. But on the morning of October 3rd, all the clocks in the shop were missing exactly 1 hour. Walter swore he hadn't touched a thing. Yet, when questioned, he grew pale and refused to open the register. "Time, sometimes, takes back what it gave," he muttered. The town assumed it was a mechanical error, but those closest to Walter remembered his son, Henry, who vanished years ago, during the same hour now missing from the clocks. A young apprentice, Elsie, began helping around the shop. One afternoon, while dismantling an old grandfather clock, she found a folded slip of paper lodged between the gears. It read, 10:23 to 11:23, the price we paid. Disturbed, she checked the other clocks. Several contained similar notes. "The deal is made. 1 life, 1 hour." He asked for more time. Elsie approached Walter, who dismissed the findings. But his hands shook as he wound a watch that no longer ticked. One evening, a woman entered the shop with an heirloom pocket watch. It ticked loudly, out of rhythm with the rest. Walter grew pale. "Where did you get this?" he asked. She replied, "My brother gave it to me. Henry Delling." She explained how her brother returned one day, disoriented, speaking of a place beyond time, a quiet hall filled with ticking and shadows. He disappeared again the following week. All that remained was the watch. That night, Walter stayed late. Elsie returned in the morning to find him gone. The pocket watch sat atop the counter, ticking normally now. Beneath it, a new note. He asked again. This time, they answered. Elsie inherited the shop. Business continued. But once a year, all clocks in the store lose exactly 1 hour, October 3rd, between 10:23 and 11:23. Customers whisper about seeing shadows move slightly out of sync with their reflections in the shop windows. Elsie keeps the notes hidden. She continues Walter's habit of winding the silent watch once a week. Last autumn, she received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence. "I found him. He still remembers." This year, as the hour approached, Elsie sat beside the grandfather clock with the strange gear. When 10:23 struck, the second hand paused, just for a moment, then reversed. Outside, the world seemed to slow. Rain that had begun to fall hung motionless in the air. The shop ticked loudly and alone. When time resumed, a new clock sat on the shelf, brass and unfamiliar. It wasn't there before. It chimed once, and on its dial, a carved message read, "For what was returned." She never found out who left it. Story 9. The Tea House on Willow Bend. In the sleepy town of Graybow, nestled under weeping willows and wrapped in morning mist, sat a little tea house called Rosemary and Thistle. It was run by Matilda Shore, a kind woman with a fondness for gossip and perfectly buttered scones. One afternoon in late April, a patron named Leonard Vance collapsed mid-sentence at his table. His tea was untouched, his scone half-eaten. Though foul play was suspected, no cause of death was confirmed. Matilda closed the shop for a week. When she reopened, she served only biscuits, no scones. Matilda's niece, Clara, visiting for the summer, discovered an old recipe book in a kitchen drawer. Between pages on lemon curd and rosewater glaze was a scribbled note. "Use for him if he returns." Clara asked about it, but Matilda only smiled and said, "Not all memories deserve sweet endings." Later that evening, Clara overheard a heated call between Matilda and someone she addressed as Detective Pierce. The words "sealed file" and "it was self-defense" were the only phrases she caught. Mrs. Beatrice Collins, a longtime regular, came in 2 days later. She whispered something to Matilda. The two embraced. When Beatrice left, she dropped a slip of paper from her purse. Clara picked it up. It read, "He was cruel to us all. but no one speaks ill of the dead. Digging further, Clara learned Leonard Vance had once been a solicitor and Matilda's husband. Long separated, quietly. The town had simply forgotten. Clara confronted her aunt, who nodded slowly. "I didn't poison him," she said, "but I made sure he was alone when it happened." She explained that the tea house had become a haven for women like her, women who had suffered and healed. Leonard had returned to taunt. The scone was meant for peace, not punishment. But someone else might have helped. That night, Matilda left a pot of tea on the table, beside a single plate, a scone, untouched. The next morning, Clara awoke to find a letter addressed to her. "You'll do fine here. Keep the tea warm, and trust your regulars." Matilda was never seen again, but every spring the willows bloom early, and each April 12th a fresh scone appears at table 6, always warm, always uneaten. Story 10. The Larkspur Ledger. In the quaint riverside town of Larkspur Hollow, the local newspaper office hadn't seen excitement in years, until Evelyn Moore, a retired journalist, returned from 20 years away and reopened its dusty doors. She began printing short, poetic columns under the title Reflections, each signed only with a typewritten E. They were thoughtful pieces, until one column contained a strange detail, the time and location of a fire that hadn't happened yet. 2 days later, it did. The article had mentioned not just the fire, but the name of the building's tenant, a recluse no one had seen in years. The fire brigade arrived just in time to save him. He later claimed a whispering woman knocked on his door just minutes before the blaze. No one knew how Evelyn knew, and she wasn't telling. Several weeks later, an obituary ran in the Sunday edition for a man still alive. Paul Travers, a local baker, stormed into the office demanding answers. Evelyn calmly offered tea and explained that sometimes stories came early. "I only write what I'm sent," she said. "I don't ask from where." That night, Paul died in his sleep. But the next morning, a different obituary appeared, one Evelyn never submitted. It listed a young woman who hadn't lived in the town for over a decade. A visitor recognized the name and said quietly, "She's been gone longer than that." Evelyn's apprentice, Nora, discovered a locked drawer in Evelyn's desk, filled with unopened envelopes. Each one held a story yet to be printed, with dates from the coming weeks. One envelope read, June 4th, the bell tower break-in. Another, June 8th, one pet too many. A third had no title at all, only the word correction. When asked, Evelyn said only, "They'll need witnesses. Some events don't like to be forgotten." The stories inside weren't always tragic. Some were warnings. Others reconciliations. Nora read one about a family reunion that hadn't yet happened. 3 weeks later, it did, exactly as written. One afternoon, Evelyn left town with no warning. Nora received a package the next day, a typewriter and a final story, unpublished. It read, "The reporter vanishes." The date was that very morning. The piece was short, almost poetic. It described Evelyn's last walk by the river, the smell of lilacs, the sound of a bell that only she could hear. The final sentence read, "She stepped through the story and into its ending." The typewriter still works, but it types only one phrase when left alone. Begin again. Nora now runs the paper. No more mysterious articles, but each month, an envelope still appears on her desk. She never sees who leaves it. But the stories are always right, even the ones she fears. The next one is labeled, "You'll be ready." But beneath that, handwritten in a different ink, are the words, "But you must choose who to save." And so each morning, she hesitates before opening the drawer. Story 11. The Lanterns of Elmwick Marsh. The marshes south of Elmwick were often silent, save for frogs and crickets, and sometimes, in late autumn, lanterns that flickered where no path existed. Locals believed they were swamp gas, but Detective Miles Garrett wasn't so sure. He'd grown up in Elmwick, and in 1979, his sister disappeared near those very reeds. Now retired, he returned to investigate the one case he never solved. He brought with him old case files, maps of the wetlands, and a small music box. The last thing she gave him before she vanished. It played a lullaby, soft and strange, that no one could identify. In a broken shed near the marsh border, Miles discovered a ledger filled with dates and names. Some were crossed out. Others had notes. Followed the light. Didn't return. The last entry was fresh, dated that morning. Next to it was a single footprint in damp soil, one too small to be Miles. It pointed away from the shed, toward the mist. Miles followed the lanterns that night, leaving breadcrumbs, torn bits of an old napkin, behind him, just in case. The fog grew thick. The lanterns danced, but never stayed. He came upon a clearing with no footprints in the mud, and yet his sister's name was carved into the bark of a tree. Beside it, a broken pendant she once wore. But more strange was the reflection in a pool nearby. Miles leaned in. The reflection was him, younger, standing with his sister. Then it blinked. He stumbled back, but the pool was calm. Miles returned every night for a week, tracing the lights, hearing whispers, finding mementos of others long gone. One voice, quiet, like rain, whispered, "We don't all want to be found." Each night the route changed. The lights stayed just out of reach, and every time he returned, a new name was added to the ledger, including his own. He crossed it out. On the 7th night, he brought no flashlight, only the pendant and the music box. The marsh was quiet. A single lantern glowed by the old tree. Inside, Miles found a photograph, aged and spotted. It showed him as a child, beside his sister. She stood behind him, smiling. But there was a second figure now, a woman, older, holding a lantern. Her eyes looked like his. The music box began to play on its own. In the stillness, the light grew warmer. Now, each fall, a lantern stays lit at the marsh's edge. Visitors leave tokens. Some swear they hear music. Some say the path is easier to follow now. And sometimes, a second light appears, smaller, gentler, a pair of footsteps in the mud, side by side. And the whisper, "You brought me back." Story 12. The Widow's Diary. In the village of Mossfield, a widow named Edith Bailey lived quietly in her ivy-covered cottage, rarely speaking to anyone since her husband's death 10 years ago. Her garden was well kept, her windows always clean, but the attic was locked, and had been ever since the funeral. When a windstorm loosened a tile and caused a leak, her niece, Amelia, offered to help. Up in the attic, amid boxes of old linens and yellowed books, she discovered a leather-bound diary. The first entry was dated the day after Edith's wedding. Curiosity burned brighter than caution. Amelia brought the diary downstairs and read by the fire. It told of a quiet marriage, filled with stifled sighs, secret arguments, and fleeting hopes. Each entry grew darker in tone, yet was always carefully written. Each page chronicled moments of a seemingly happy life. Tea in the garden, long walks, laughter. But the tone slowly shifted. Mentions of bruises, of apologies that never came. And then, a sentence underlined 3 times. He took more than my time. He took my name. There were other hints. A dog who stopped barking. A neighbor who asked too many questions and moved away. Amelia felt the walls of the house lean in. She could almost hear Edith's memories echo through the floorboards. The final entry, before a gap of several years, simply read, "He sleeps beneath the hawthorn tree." That evening, Amelia walked out to the hawthorn tree in the garden, the one Edith never trimmed. She noticed a slight dip in the soil, half concealed by roots. Later that night, she returned with a flashlight and a garden trowel. Digging slowly, she struck something hard. Wood. A box. Inside was a silver locket, and beneath it, an old wedding ring and a weathered, dried-out wallet. It held a photo of a man Amelia didn't recognize, until she compared it to a portrait over Edith's fireplace. Her late husband. A second box, smaller, was found deeper beneath the soil. It held torn pages from the diary, stained and partly burned. The entries revealed plans, coded letters, and a date circled in red. June 3, 1977, the day of his disappearance. Amelia took the wallet to the local constable, who listened quietly. He returned with her to the house and asked Edith a few gentle questions. Edith didn't deny anything. She looked up from her tea, nodded once, and said, "It was justice, quiet and overdue." No charges were filed. The constable later confided to Amelia that Edith had once come to him with bruises and fear, years before. "There are truths too heavy for courtrooms," he said. That night, Amelia found the diary had been moved. A fresh page had been added. "Thank you, my dear. He would have buried me first." Now, each spring, the hawthorn tree blossoms more fully than any other in the village. Children play beneath it. Edith sometimes sits nearby with a cup of tea, the diary resting on her lap. She's begun writing again. Not about him, but about her garden, her birds, her freedom. She writes to women she's never met, telling them they're not alone. A small wooden sign has been placed at the base of the tree. It reads, "For those who grew beyond their fear." And the last line of her new journal, "Some roots run deep, but not all need to stay buried." Story 13. The Bell in Room 3. The Willowmere Inn, tucked along the cliffs near the coast, had only 6 rooms, each cozy, lined with soft blankets and bathed in ocean air. But Room 3 had a story. Guests who stayed there often complained of a bell ringing at odd hours, a soft chime with no visible source. Margaret, the innkeeper, had heard the stories for years. "It's just the pipes," she'd say. But deep down, she suspected otherwise, especially since the ledger still showed one unclaimed guest, checked in 27 years ago. No checkout date, no payment. It was said that sometimes the room felt colder than the others, that if you stayed up long enough, you might hear someone pacing, or someone breathing. In a dusty drawer behind the front desk, Margaret kept the old reservation books. One night, she finally looked back to the page from 1996. Mr. Alton Wren, Room 3, paid in advance. No forwarding address. She found an envelope taped to the inside of the ledger cover. Inside was a single brass key and a note. "Don't open it after midnight." The handwriting was delicate, elegant, and beneath the envelope was a pressed flower, faded but whole. That night, a storm rolled in. The inn lost power. Guests were relocated to the front lounge with candles and cocoa. Margaret checked room 3 out of habit. The bell rang as she opened the door, a gentle chime, like the kind used in old train stations. But there was no bell in the room. On the bed lay a journal, open to a final entry. I asked for peace. I was given echo. The journal's earlier pages described long evenings spent waiting. For a letter. For forgiveness. For release, room 3's window looked out over the sea. Margaret sat there, thinking of the guest who never left. She opened the journal again, flipping back. Earlier entries mentioned someone waiting for news that never came. A lost letter. A shipwreck. A misunderstanding that turned into a lifetime. The last page was newly written. Fresh ink. Her own name appeared. It read, "She will help me ring once more." At dawn, the storm broke. A guest in room 5 reported seeing a man standing on the cliff's edge at sunrise, holding a bell rope in one hand. No footprints were found, but in room 3, the brass key lay on the pillow. The journal was gone, and on the window pane, written in dew, "Thank you for staying." Margaret now keeps room 3 unlocked, with fresh linens and a warm lamp. No one books it. But sometimes, at twilight, the bell rings softly, once, then twice. Sometimes, a pressed flower appears on the pillow, and if you listen closely, you might hear a voice in the waves whispering, "The bell is not for me. It is for you." And now, dear listener, you've walked with us through stories of roots, of whispers and wild flowers. The world is still quiet. Let it remain so while you sleep. Good night.